You're going to hear in the next 50 minutes or so from a most remarkable person, James Brett. He's modest. He's going to tell you his life story as how he came to Afghanistan to create this most extraordinary initiative and where he thinks it will go. I'm proud to be associated with the charity. I'm proud of what he has achieved and will achieve, and I'm sure you will be moved and extremely interested by what he has to say. James, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. If you don't mind, I'll just sit while I talk, if that's all right. I'm not lazy, but you know. Yeah, so Plant for Peace. You know, there's a description of Plant for Peace there on, you know, that's written. You know, an initiative designed specifically to assist rural communities and smallholder farmers in conflict and post-conflict territories around the world to achieve food security and sustainable economic development, thereby contributing to stability by empowering communities to become self-sufficient through sustainable agriculture and trade. That's, you know, might be a bit of a statement, but it basically means that we all need to fulfill our own needs in life, and you know, the Afghan people haven't really been fulfilling their needs to survive. You know, Plant for Peace does this by bringing people together so as to enable communities to participate in the global food industry. Between 80 and 85% of the population of Afghanistan survive from agriculture, horticulture, rural communities, you know. We don't need to reinvent wheels, we just need to help them with the wheel they're already turning, you know. And that's a sort of broad overview description of what we're trying to achieve here.
Afghanistan, a country where millions rely on the poppy trade to survive. Over 90% of the world's heroin comes from poppies grown there. If there was a way to move Afghan farmers from growing poppies to growing other crops, the benefit to the country and to the world would be immense. This is the vision of one man, James Brett, the founder of Plant for Peace. His aim is to develop a long-term, sustainable agriculture system for the country.
Pomegranate is the answer.
Yes. James and Plant for Peace are selling the message that growing pomegranates instead of poppies can be more profitable for the farmers. And the wonderful fact is that Afghanistan grows the best pomegranates in the world. At specially arranged jirgas, he's reached out to the tribal leaders, showing them there is a real alternative.
Today, from how many people have come, it's clear that we need this new beginning. We need to join together. It's clear after all the years of trouble, the wars, 30-something years of trouble in Afghanistan, it's clear we need this new strength, this new energy. I believe the tribal system and the farmers of Afghanistan are this energy. I believe the pomegranate is the answer as the leading crop.
And they're signing up to the scheme. The farmers become members of the Plant for Peace National Cooperative. This will ensure a profitable market for their produce and support their transition from growing illegal opiate poppies to growing pomegranates and other crops. James's extraordinary energy and empathy with the Afghan people has led him to some remarkable events. Following one jirga, to show their support for Plant for Peace, the elders and officials arranged for James to oversee the burning of 13 tons of drugs, with a street value of $780 million. If the Plant for Peace mission succeeds, Afghanistan will become more stable, more peaceful, and more prosperous. Then Allied troops can start to come home.
So how did it all happen? How did I get to that point in my life that happened? So I'm going to tell you my story. I was brought up in Swindon in Wiltshire. I'm the second eldest of 5 children. I was brought up in a religious family and used to go to church every Sunday, and my grandfather was the head of our church. And you know, as a child, when I look back, you know, everything seemed okay. And then at the age of roughly about the age of 9 or 10, my grandfather started sexually abusing me, and that went on for roughly about 4 years or something. And you know, obviously my life, my sort of childhood was very sheltered, And you know, we didn't ever talk about sex or anything like that. And if ever anything like that was mentioned, my father would beat me anyway. You know, and he was quite a sort of strict disciplinarian and whatever else. And you know, anyway, so I went to school, and we had our first sort of sex education class, and I think I was 13 or something, and it just dawned on me in that lesson, you know, when the sort of teacher talked about the birds and the bees and everything, what was happening to me, like, and I thought, oh, that's what he does every week to me, like, and that was a turning point for me. You know, up until then, I'd been quite religious, and my you know, my mother, who you know, my mother had always fostered babies all through my childhood. In fact, through my childhood, she fostered 19 babies altogether, and you know, much to her own, you know, she wouldn't ever let us have a school dinner at school. I had to go home every day for school dinner. She said, "I'm your mum, I'll cook you your dinner," and all this sort of thing. You don't have to have it at school and whatever else. And you know, she was in the church, really, I suppose. She was probably, when I look back, she was probably the only person who had shown, you know, sort of true sort of actions of someone who portrayed that type of belief. Anyway, in 1985, there was a competition in Swindon in Wiltshire, and much to my mother's embarrassment, bless her, my brother put her in for the competition. She won Supermum of Wiltshire, and she was in the local newspaper and everything, and you know, bless her. And anyway, that was in 1985, and then in 1986, after I'd managed to dodge my grandfather. You know, he was going to preach at different churches, and he'd abuse me on the way home, and he always used to get me to cut his grass and whatever else, and he sort of always, wherever he could, he'd take me, and you know, whatever. And I came to a point in my childhood at the age of about 15 where I said, this is not happening anymore, it's just not happening, I'm not accepting it, you know. And I lived for probably a year, where I had all the different emotions going through my brain. Oh, what can I do? How can I get out of this? And I used to make up excuses for why I wouldn't go and round his house. Or on a Sunday in our chapel, for example, on a Saturday in our chapel, he'd set the chairs up sometimes, and he'd take me there and set the chairs up, and I'd have to help him, and then he'd abuse me in the chapel and preach the next day, you know. And I just thought, how can I get out of this? So I managed to dodge him and, you know, make all these different excuses. And then, you know, as I said, my mum won Supermum of the Year and everything. And then it got to one Sunday, and my grandfather was saying, you have to, my father was saying, oh, you've got to go with my dad and everything, you know, to this church that he was going to preach at. And I said, oh, I'm not going, like, you know, and I didn't really have any more excuses. And for that whole period of time, when I realised what it was, up until when I told my parents, which I did that day, you know, I'd had to carry all the burden of what would happen when I told. Would they believe me? Would they put me in prison? Would they say I was to blame, blah, 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 and all the rest of it, like, you know. And anyway, so when my father said, you will go with him, well, I said, no, I'm not going. And he said, you will. It just came out of it. I mean, you know, I just came out of it. I said, oh, your father abused me, like, you know. I mean, he said, oh, what you on about? I said, go and ask him. I said, go and ask him. And my grandfather lived round the corner from us, about 300 metres from my childhood house. So anyway, my father went round and asked him, and he denied it. My father come back and said that he said that his father had just punished me because I was naughty, like. And I said, no, he didn't. I said, he didn't punish me. I said, go and ask him again. I was distraught. I was really distraught. And he went round and asked again, and this time my grandfather admitted it. So he came back, and the next day my mother called social services, who came round to the house, and, you know, if you fostered all those children, you've got quite a reputation in social services. All the children that my mother fostered were all below 2 years of age, and they were all fostered because they'd had abuse in the first 2 years of their life. So, you know, I remember a baby at 6 months who came with a broken arm and a broken leg and things like that. My mother always used to have those type of very vulnerable babies. Anyway, the social services came to the house, and the chap said, oh, do you want another baby, like, you know, do you want to look after another baby? And my mother said, oh, I can't, she said, I can't foster children anymore because I can't look after my own. I didn't look after my own, like, you know. And it was like, at that point, the lights went out in her eyes, you know. That's what it was like. And anyway, the next day, my father brought my grandfather around the house and said, said to me, "Oh, it says in the Bible you need to forgive and forget, so give my dad a hug," like, you know. And I was obviously pretty annoyed and everything, and I was, you know, 16-year-old kid, and my mother just started to get withdrawn and everything, and then she was never the same again. And then 3 months later, she jumped off a car park and killed herself. Like, yeah. You know, which obviously hurts, you know. And in the end, there was an anonymous phone call to the police. There's an anonymous phone call to the police, and they asked me to go there. So my father got my grandfather to give me a lift with him to another elder in Swindon, and they got me in the back of this car, and they all prayed that God would protect my grandfather from the interview that I had in the police station. And then they dropped me at the police station. And I went into the police interview room, and they interviewed me in the window where the interview took place, looked out to the car park that my mother had jumped off, and which was you know, obviously pretty traumatic. And you know, in those days, society didn't have a clue about dealing with child sexual abuse. They still don't really now know how to deal with child sexual abuse, but you know, it gets more and more apparent, the underlying issues that come from it. And they interviewed me, and the police said, "Oh, your grandfather's never had a criminal record, and you know, he's a sort of the head of the church and an upright member of the community, so we don't really want to do anything. You know, it'd be good if you just signed here, and we'll make sure it won't happen again." You know, and I thought to myself, my mother jumped off that car park out that window there. You're telling me it'll never happen again, and I already know it'll never happen again, because I stopped it happening nearly a year ago. And I felt my mother had a great sort of moral code about herself, you know, and as I say, she was probably the only person I knew that in that sort of background of being brought up religiously who wasn't a hypocrite, or felt she wasn't a hypocrite. And she'd always taught me that, you know, the police were the protectors of society, and you know, I'd always looked at God as someone who you know, I looked at respectfully, and my mother had always taught me about the police and that they'd protect you, and I felt they didn't protect me that day, you know. And I left that police station, and I was broken, but I was also very angry, and there was a fire burning in me, and I felt that society now should pay, like, you know. And so I started taking drugs. I became very violent as a person. I got into serious crime. I used to shoplift all the time. I even came here shoplifting once. I had a fight with about 6 security guards outside Jenner's at the high street here, because I nicked a load of designer shirts, like, you know. And I just went on a rampage, because I became very, very dysfunctional. And you know, I went shoplifting around Europe from the age of 17. And for 2 years I went shoplifting around Europe, Austria and Switzerland. Didn't even know what shoplifting was, so you could you know, get good clothing and sell it back here and go back again. And the whole thing was a mess. And I was smoking cannabis every day, about 30 joints of hash a day. And I used to go to my local doctor, my family doctor, who, you know, knew my mum and everything, and tried to beg him to prescribe me, which obviously he couldn't and everything. And I was put under the mental health. And then when I was 19, a friend of mine, I had two really good friends in my childhood. One died from a drug-induced car crash at the age of 29, and the other one died with a needle in his arm at the age of 24. The one who died at the age of 24, he was really he was also very dysfunctional, and that's probably why we got on. And I was smoking loads and loads of cannabis. I was mugging the local sort of hash dealers in Swindon, because I couldn't sustain the habit financially. You know, the crime I was doing didn't pay for the habit and everything. And in the end, I said to him, "Let's go to Amsterdam, and we'll get some there. It's cheaper." So I took him to Amsterdam, and I agreed to pay him and everything. And we went there, and I bought 10 kilos of hash and strapped it all to him, the whole lot. And he came back through customs, and he got arrested, you know. And he was one of my best friends, and I was really angry at myself, very angry at myself. You know, I felt that even though I'd had a financial agreement with him, morally I shouldn't have asked a friend to do that. I should have just got anyone. So he went to jail, and I went home to my father's house. And once he'd gone through the system and gone through the courts and put in the jail, I then found which jail he was in, which was Rochester Young Offenders Institute in Kent. And I went to visit him and I said, oh, I'm going to put this matter right. You know, I said, it's not good. I said, I'm going to tell the police that I've forced you with a knife to do it. And he said, oh, don't do that, don't do that. I said, no, I must. And I went back home and gave a friend of mine a load of hash and said, keep visiting me and giving me that because I need it. It was like medicine for me almost. And I said, I'm going to the jail. And I gave myself up and got put in Rochester Young Offenders Institute for 6 months, waiting for trial. And at that time in my life, it was the best 6 months of my life. You know, I actually had an identity in there. I felt that I belonged. You know, there was I don't know. There was something about it where I had a massive emptiness in my life, and that place gave me something that it probably wouldn't give most people. And I really adapted to it well, and you know, got on well there and all that sort of stuff. And they gave me occupational therapy and whatever else, and they really looked after me. They also introduced me to the Criminal Injuries Compensation Board, which at that time was based in Glasgow. And years later, I was awarded compensation for the abuse on that my grandfather had done on me. Anyway, I went to court with my friend, who was also called James, and the judge said, "Oh, that I should have got 4 years," but he gave me and James 2 years probation each. And you know, because of my background, and said I'd had enough trauma in my life, and they said you could go. He said you could leave, you're free to go. And I cried and said, "Oh, please don't let me go. I want to stay. What am I going to do?" I said, "If I go back out there, it's just going to be crazy again." He said, "No, you've got to go and see the probation officer. She'll help you." So I went to the probation appointment the following week, the first appointment, and I went there and I said, "Look," I said, "I've got to be honest with you." I said, I'm not coming to your probation service." She goes, "Oh, I'll have to report you and you'll go back to jail." I said, you report me." I said, "I liked it there anyway." She goes, "Well, how do you expect me to be able to help you?" I said, "Listen, please just give me if you can, give me a sleeping bag. That's all I need from you." I said, "But I'm not coming again regardless, you know." So she gave me a sleeping bag, with the same sleeping bag. This was 1991, and I still have the sleeping bag now. Like, you know, it was a really good sleeping bag. It was the only good thing they ever did for me, bless them. She gave me a sleeping bag and a saucepan, and I had a sheath knife anyway that I carried all the time because I had quite a reputation and all the rest of it. And I walked from the probation office to Swindon Library, and I nicked a book on British woodland and medicinal plants, and I moved into a woods just outside the village of Rawton, which is where I was brought up next to Swindon. And I moved into this woods, and because I didn't belong in this. It was me and them, you know, and them was like nearly 6 billion people, and it was just me. And I just got into nature. I really got into it. I found something that I could hold on to. It gave me a sense of, sense of being, and I used to take bark off the trees and chew it and spit it out. It's a good way to brush your teeth. And there's a chap from the army here, and I know you probably know a few of these techniques, and you can eat certain things and all the rest of it. And I used to cut down all the pith out, get all the pith out of the burdock plants and whatever else, and stinging nettle teas and soups and all sorts, and washing the stream. And I really just got into it, and I spent a few months there, and just trying to make sense of what had gone on. But I was really angry and bitter and everything. I remember waking up in the middle of the night because it was raining so hard. I didn't have a tent or nothing. I just had a sleeping bag. It was really raining hard. I was sort of sleeping on a bank almost, and it rained so hard that the rain came down the thing. And I woke up because it was so much hard rain that the water was coming over my head. I was like I couldn't hardly sort of breathe and everything. And I remember getting up and just looking up to the sky through the trees and shouting, "God, why?" Like I was really tormented. Why like that? And then I started to have all these different thoughts came into my head, and I sort of looked through over the time that I was there, I looked through the trees at night to the glow of the lights of Swindon, and just thought, what is that about? Like, how can it be? How can my life be this? There's got to be more to it. And thoughts of Mahatma Gandhi started coming into my mind, and Mother Teresa and people. I used to think, flipping it. I mean, they're great people. There are some great people out there, and in life it would be good if I could maybe try and do something good, perhaps. But I couldn't make sense of it all. It was all muddled up in the madness of me also being cynical. I used to look at society and think, you pay your electric bill. Imagine that. How could you be that stupid? You don't even need one here, and stuff like that. All that sort of thing. And anyway, my friend, my other best friend who died at the age of 29 from a drug-induced car crash. He'd done a load of magic mushrooms with me, and on a trip, he said, he said to him to join the Navy. So next thing I know, he's now living at, I think it's Culdrose in Halston, and there's a Navy base there, and he moved there and he joined the Navy and all the rest of it. And I was quite angry about it at the time because I was so against society and all the rest of it. I thought to join the military or to join an establishment like that, you were really a focal point of society. So I was quite angry with him, and I remember walking to Swindon Station the day he left, and said, give him a hug and said, I'm really sad about it, but see you later. And then I went back to the woods. Anyway, a few months went by, and while I was in the woods, and I thought, I've got to get out of here now. It's time to move, but I can't move back into Swindon or anything. So I contacted him and said, I want to come and stay. And he now had a flat in. He'd now moved to Plymouth, and he had a flat in Plymouth. So I went to sleep on his floor in Plymouth, and on the floor of his flat, and ended up getting into the rave scene, And before the day I moved, I nicked a mountain bike in Swindon, and I bought a load of ecstasy, and off I went down there and everything. And this was the madness of my life. The first time I took an ecstasy tablet, and I'm really against all that sort of thing. I'm only expressing that I've lived it. I'm not, I don't condone any of it whatsoever. But the day and this also because I was so dysfunctional, but the day I took my first ecstasy, I liked it so much that I went and bought 100, and I used to have one every day for breakfast. I didn't do it to go to a nightclub or nothing. I took it just every day. It was what I was doing. I'd smoked 20 joints and everything. And anyway, so I went down, lived in Plymouth, and I remember walking past the bus station when I used to go. I got myself a little mirror dinghy boat, and I used to just sail off the coast of Plymouth while I slept on my friend's floor. Then I ended up getting a bedsit, but I was now living like I was in. I was living in Plymouth, but I was living like I was living in the woods as best you could. So in my bedsit, I ended up getting my own bedsit, and in my bedsit I had the sleeping bag that I've still got, and I used to. I had one bedroom in it with a double bed, and it was all made and everything. It was all nice, but I didn't sleep in beds. I slept in woods, and I slept in sleeping bags. So every night I used to get my sleeping bag out and pull the sofa, which was in the sort of kitchen, sort of main room area, studio type thing, pull that out and sleep behind the sofa. Anyway, I got into ended up getting into the rave scene and all the rest of it, and I met a girl who was at a party in Plymouth, and I was really scared of girls, really, really nervous of them. Obviously I'd been abused, and I had some really twisted perceptions of myself, and the perception of men and women and all the rest of it, and sex and everything. And anyway, I asked her out. It was the first sort of real girlfriend I had, really, and she said she'd go out with me, and I said, "Oh, come with me a minute then." So we walked down the next day to the harbour in Plymouth, and I had my mirror dinghy there, and I said, we're going to sail for me. I said, if you go out with me, I said, I want you to go out with me, but if you are, you need to agree to something. She goes, oh, what? I said, if you go out with me, I said, we're going to practice not speaking to each other, and then when we think we're ready, we're going to sail out from here, and we're going to find somewhere. We're going to go to a place somewhere in this world by boat where there's no one, and when we get there, we're not allowed to wear any clothes. We've got to go around on all fours, and we're not allowed to talk to each other so long that when we do start communicating with each other again, we only grunt like animals. And she ended up marrying me, so she obviously thought that was quite an attractive option, bless her. And anyway, she then came that she was going to, we got on and all the rest of it. She was my girlfriend, and now we got to the point where she was going to come and stay, and it brought loads of fear in me because I didn't know how to act. I didn't know how to act. I was scared. So I thought I've got to get these. I've got to suss this situation out, So I went down to the red light district in Plymouth, and a couple of days before she came, and I got a prostitute, and I went to her flat and got undressed, and she got undressed, and then because of the abuse issues, I froze. I thought, what can I do? And I got really scared. I said, "This guy, I'm really sorry. I'll keep the money, thanks." Bye. And I legged it, And I went back, and then my wife came to. She wasn't my wife, she was my girlfriend, and she came to stay, and we got to the nighttime bit, and she went and stayed in the bedroom in the bed when it came to the nighttime, and I said, I don't sleep there, you carry on, have a nice night's sleep and everything. And I slept behind the sofa, and the next day she got up, and I thought, as you should, make breakfast for your girlfriend, innit? So I did the dishes, washed the dishes up in the bowl, in the sink, and washed my pants and socks at the same time and wrung them out and put the toast under one half of the grill and a pair of pants and socks under the other half of the grill, like, you know, because that's how I dried my washing. That's what I did. Anyway, to cut a long story short, I said to her, in the end, I got kicked out of that bed sit because a mouse moved in and I fed it because it was a companion, and in the end, I infested the whole block of 6 bed sits with mice. So I got kicked out. So and she was living in Reading at the time ago, so I rang her and said I've been booted out because of the mice. You know, she said I told you that happened. And anyway, I said let's go to Scotland. So we ended up camping for about 3 months at the bottom of Ben Nevis, which was great, and I really enjoyed it. I had a blue plastic sheet and that, and I signed on, and I got my benefits at Fort William there. And every day I run at Ben Nevis, I really got into. I was still smoking loads of hash, but I was still quite fit. And in fact, I was quite proud that nearly every day I was doing Ben Nevis in about 4.5 hours. I know people can do it a lot quicker, but that's still good, you know. And then. While I was in Plymouth, I'd walked into a solicitor's office one day and just told them what had happened about the abuse, and they'd contacted the Criminal Injuries Compensation Board. And I ended up winning some money compensation, and we moved back down to Swindon, and a friend of mine ended up doing a council exchange with me in a town about 20 miles from Swindon. And I ended up buying this house outright. And now I was starting to, I had some money and I bought this house outright and everything. And then I started importing furniture from Indonesia, and I got interested. I'm now living down south. I imported furniture from Indonesia. I've done loads of travelling. I've been to about 80 odd countries. And one country I really liked was Indonesia, and I ended up importing all these handicrafts and everything. It was like the first legitimate venture I'd ever done, really, properly. And I ended up supplying a friend of mine who lived in Dumfries and Galloway, and I said to him, if any properties ever come up in Dumfries and Galloway, please let me know, because it's a great neck of the woods, you know, it's out the way and all the rest of it. Anyway, he rang me one day and said, this farmhouse has come up for sale. It's 35 acres at the end of a track and all the rest of it. So I literally drove the next day up to Dumfries and Galloway, and I pulled into this place and knocked the door. And he didn't tell me this, my friend. They're so laid back in Dumfries and Galloway. It's great, but the shepherd who kept sheep on this 35 acres had said, the owner of the place had said to this shepherd the day before, I might put this place on the market. 2 days later, I'm knocking his door saying, I understand it's for sale, like, you know. And I drove into this place, and it was 15 feet away from the house was this river, you know, and I didn't even have to look at the property or anything. I knocked the door and said, is this place for sale? He said, yeah. I said, oh, I'll buy it then, thanks. And he goes, oh, don't you want to have a look in the house? I said, I'm not interested in the house at all. I'm only buying it because you've got a river. You know, and I said, how much is it anyway? You know, and I'd already said, yeah, but anyway, so I bought it, and I moved there with my first wife. We had 2 daughters who came and moved there. You know, we all moved there, and then life seemed quite normal then we got to 1999, and I was invited by my friend in Dumfries and Galloway. He had a shop in Edinburgh selling Afghan carpets, and he was buying them from Peshawar in northern Pakistan. And he invited me, did I want to go there? And I said, yeah, why not? So I went there, and I ended up drinking pomegranate juice for the first time, and in northern Pakistan. As soon as I said I'm going to make a drink from this, and I made a drink called Pomegranate, which was the first pomegranate juice drink in Britain, and ended up in every single supermarket. I never stopped thinking about pomegranates from that day in October 1999. And, you know, it hit the shelves. I got all the investment and everything. I had no history of the food and drinks industry or anything. But I just knew that it was a good product, but it also had a feeling about it. There was something about it. And I put that on the shelves of everywhere. We're living in Scotland. And then I had in 2004, I was in a newspaper in England that telling my life story, and I'd already realised through the pomegranate juice that Afghanistan had the best pomegranates in the world, but I also recognised that it had a pretty crazy export, which was heroin, you know, that my best friend had died from, and you know, I had loads of sort of drug-related incidents of heroin in my life with friends and everything. You know, a friend now 10 months ago had his leg cut off because of the amount of injections he'd done of heroin in his leg. You know, and so I said in this article, I said, if this drink goes well, I'd like to do something in Afghanistan. That was in 2004. And then about a month later after that article, I had all my issues caught up with me and I had a breakdown. And I was put in Elsa Hospital in Ayrshire. I was put in a psychiatric unit. And I was sectioned under the mental health. While I was there, I ended up putting on loads of weight. I was diagnosed as schizophrenic, manic, depressed and bipolar, you know, the whole lot. I wasn't any of it. I was just sad. I was just upset. I was just angry. I was hurting, you know. And that bottom picture there is me. I realised that Blue Tack could stop the alarm system on the ward, on the door. So I got some Blue Pack and did a Blue Tack. Stopped the alarm working in the hospital and did a runner and went on holiday to Nepal, like, you know. And I'm 24 stone in weight in that picture, and I was just walking. This is on a plateau, a village on a plateau in Nepal, and I rang up the psychiatric hospital at Elsa when I arrived in Kathmandu and said, "Oh, I'll be back in about a week. Don't worry about me," like, you know. It was like really unbelievable. They said, "What?" They said, "The police are looking." I said, "I'll tell them I'll be back when I'll be there anyway." And another thing, because I felt I had a strong connection with animals and with nature and everything, I was led on my bed in the psychiatric unit, and so I'll just tell you this one story. It represents a lot, I feel. And there was an article in a newspaper I was reading that showed 3 jaguar cubs that had been born at Dartmoor Wildlife Park. And I thought, wow, I'd love to see those cats. And years earlier, my brother-in-law, he's an artist, he'd done a portrait of Lord Bath at Longleat, and I'd gone with him and met Lord Bath and everything. So I rang up Longleat from the patient phone in the psychiatric unit in Elsa Hospital. Said, "Oh, I'm James Brett." I said to him, I know Lord Bath. I didn't really know him, I met him. I said, "I know Lord Bath." I said, "I need an introduction to Dartmoor Wildlife Park. I want to join their cat breeding programme." They didn't know I was in a mental hospital. If they did, they'd have thought it was mad, you know, but it was probably mad. Anyway, they said, "I'll call back in a couple of days. We'll sort it out." So I called Longleat 2 days later from the same patient phone, and then they said, "Oh, the owner of Dartmoor Wildlife Park's waiting for your call. Looking forward to meeting you." Like, you know, phone down, picked the phone back up, and called the owner of Dartmoor Wildlife Park. And I said, "Oh, I'm James Brett." I said, "I'd love to come and meet your jaguar cub. Love to get involved with your programme." "Come down," he said. Blue Tack on the alarm system. Jumps in my car straight down to Dartmoor, and I'm down there, and I had a great time because of, you know, I just feel so. I feel I have a strong connection with animals and with nature and everything, and so I haven't really got so much fear. But also as a child, through all the abuse I went through and everything, I also managed to understand fear. You know, I had butterflies in my stomach for most of my childhood, and if you have those in your stomach, then you're not going to be fazed by a lot of things, you know. So anyway, so I went in the wolf pen, and I had a play fight with one of the wolves, much to the annoyance of the head of the pack of the wolves, and I had these 3 jaguar cubs and all the rest of it, and he said, "Oh, you've got a great energy." The owner of Dartmoor, he's 82, you know, he's quite an eccentric character anyway. His gravestone's already up in the grounds, saying, you know, with a mad phrase on it about himself. But anyway, and I said to him, I said, "I'd like to take one of these." No, sorry, I went back to the mental hospital anyway. I got back to the mental hospital, I thought about what he'd said, and he'd said that he takes one of these cats to schools. So I rang him up from the mental hospital. I said, "Hey," he himself still didn't know I was in the psychiatric unit. I rang him up and said, "Hey," I said, "I want to take this cat to my daughter's school in Cast Fairn in Dumfries and Galloway. There's only 8 children in the whole school. You know, it's a real small place." Anyway, he said, "Yeah, that'd be all right." So I rang I then put the phone on. I said, "Let me arrange it." So I rang a hash dealer in Swindon and said, "Oi, I want you to go down to Dartmoor, pick a jaguar cub up and bring it up to this school and let the school see it." He goes, "What?" He goes, "I thought you was in the mental hospital." I said, "I am, but don't worry about that." I said, he goes, "I ain't got a vehicle." I said, "I'll sort you a van out." So I rang a van dealer I know in Swindon and said, "Oi, mate, I need a van." He said, "Oh," he goes, "I thought you was in the mental." I said, "I am, get that van over to my friend." A few days later, this old boy who's 80-something with a jaguar cub in the back of this van takes it to my daughter's school. The mental hospital wouldn't let me out for the day, and they knew my trick with the Blue Tack, so they were keeping their eye on me. And my daughter ended up in the Scottish, I think it's Scottish Mail, with a picture of this guy. And I had parents from the school ring me up at the mental hospital to thank me, saying it was the best school day they'd had. And I went back to my room and laid on my bed and bawled my eyes out, like, you know. And, you know, there's a strong message in that, you know, when you're sexual abuse as a child makes you manipulate. It forces you to manipulate adults when you're a child to get out of the situation of being abused. And when that makes you do that, it forces you as a child to become deceitful, because if you're a child and manipulate, you become deceitful. And that deceitfulness, if the issues that you have as a child are not dealt with correctly, then turns into criminality. And if you look at the statistics of prisons, psychiatric hospitals and whatever else, the biggest membership of the population in those places, over 60% of British prisons today were sexually abused. At least that in mental hospitals. You know, it's a massive, massive problem in our society, and we're not grasping the cost. I've cost this society, our society, millions of pounds in dysfunctional behaviour, none of which I'm proud of, and all of which could have been, didn't need to happen. Anyway, that all went on. I came out of the psychiatric unit in the end, and I was sat in the chair in Scotland, and a friend of mine contacted me and said, I'd like you to come to Swindon. I was 24 stone in weight. I was still taking loads of psychiatric medication, but I was an outpatient now. And he said, I'd like to come to Swindon to talk to a chap who helps adult survivors of child sexual abuse. You know, through my mental state of all the medication and whatever else, the drink I was on and whatever, I thought, what is this? You know, and I put the phone down. Anyway, 2 weeks later, I was in Swindon visiting my brothers and sisters. And I rang my friend up, and he took me to see this chap, and I went to see him. And he was a counsellor in Swindon for helping the, survivors. And he asked me if I was on anything, and I told him what I was on. And he said, if you get off of everything, he said, I can help you. And I ended up driving from Scotland, Dumfries and Galloway to Swindon every Monday for a 2-hour counselling session for the next 18 months. And I didn't miss one Monday, And I got really well, really well. And I went to see the head consultant psychiatrist at Elsa Hospital in Ayrshire on November the 14th, 2006, and he took me off the mental health, and I'd been on it since I was 16. And it was a massive, massive day for me, massive, overwhelming, beautiful, beautiful day, it was a milestone. And that was November the 14th, 2006, and March 2007, a lady contacted me called Dr. Julia Wright, and she was running Wright Organic Gardens in Coventry. And she asked me if I'd go to Kabul to talk to farmers, go to Afghanistan and talk to farmers about growing pomegranates. And I said, yeah, why not? And I mean, if you look at my circumstance, I didn't say, but while I was in the psychiatric unit, the manager, I was the chief executive of that juice company, the managing director stole the company off of me, and so I lost that juice company. So I'm there now. I've come out of a psychiatric unit. I've had all my life, all the trauma in my life. As far as I'm concerned, I'm in recovery, and I don't have a lot to lose. I said, yeah, why not? I'll go there. So I dressed as an Afghan. I flew to Peshawar. I contacted the shipping agent of this chap in Peshawar, and flew to him and said, I need to borrow a son of yours as a translator. And he had 5 sons. And I just thought he was a shipping agent in Peshawar. I didn't realise who he was. Now, of course, I do know who he was. In fact, his father was the head of the Afridi tribe in the Khyber Pass in Fatah, federally administered tribal area. Anyway, I borrowed the son, and I drove up through the Khyber Pass, which was the first time I entered Afghanistan. And it was April, it was opium harvest time, and I got to 40 minutes into Afghanistan, the Pakistan side of Jalalabad, there was just fields of opium everywhere. And I thought, I've got to do something about this, but, who am I to do something about it? And I drove on up to Kabul. I gave my talk in this seminar. I was there 3 days, and I had to drive back to Pakistan now to fly home with this translator. And it just happened. I went into a shop and I bought a big piece of card, and I bought a big piece of card and I writ on it, pomegranate is the answer. And I got to this field of opium farmers, that first picture there, and I stopped the car and I ran into the field of opium farmers, and I asked this one farmer with my translator if he'd grow pomegranates with me, And I asked him about his life and told him about mine, and told him about the problems of heroin in Britain and the Western world or whatever. And we sort of connected really through both being empty people. And he recognised my emptiness in my life, and I recognised his, and it was just a normal common denominator between us, really. And one of the most overwhelming things about me running into that field and speaking to him was that he had no perception of the outside world, really. He hadn't really had any access to electricity, and he didn't read or write or nothing. He was illiterate, and it was almost like all he knew is that someone turned up twice a year and paid him some money at the farm gate for his crop. And I said to him, let's grow pomegranates and let's see what happens. I said, I'll support you. I said, give me 2 months. If you don't hear from me forget it. I said, but I'll see what I can do, you know. I went back to the UK and, you know, I mean, it was all pretty surreal. I took a couple of pictures and that picture ended up on BBC World News and CNN and everything. And I went to see a friend of mine and we made a sign on a laptop that said, this land's been acquired as an alternative livelihood from poppies to pomegranates. And I rang up this shipping agent, this Afridi, and I said, I'm going to send you a picture on the email, please construct this sign, you know. He rang me 2 weeks later. I was in Swindon. I was in Scotland. He said, your sign's ready. Down the metal workers. I said, I'll pick it up then. So I flew back to Pakistan and went and picked the sign up, put it on a pickup truck, drove it back through the Khyber Pass, was digging the holes, you know, putting this sign up on this farmer's land. And after the village came out, then someone from the Foreign Affairs Ministry wanted to talk to me. Then a film crew did an interview the next day, and I ended up in a studio in Jalalabad. And they said, the interview really was, the only question they asked me, what are you doing here? I said, my answer was, this country needs to grow more pomegranates. I'd like to talk to your president about it. You know, they probably just thought I was nuts. I mean, they didn't know my history, but I probably was nuts. There was so many people contact that studio that I flew back to the UK with a notepad and a pen. I was adding up all the hectares that the director of the film, the director of the studio would contact me saying, oh, we've had another 200 hectares pledged today, and I added up and I was thinking, this is unbelievable, like this is really mad. So I spoke to the Afridi and said I need an introduction into the with the elders in eastern Afghanistan. He introduced me to a chap called Babrak Shimari, who was the sort of main elder in the Shimara tribe on the east, in the east there. And I asked him, I said, can we hold a tribal gathering? And you know, he basically sort of said, no, you're a white Westerner. I said, oh, look who's introduced me, this Afridi, like. And then he said, oh, okay, fair enough, I'll see what I can do. I flew back to the UK. He rang me up 2 weeks later and said, some elders want to see you. So I flew to Nangarhar province, and I took a friend of mine whose girlfriend was the travel editor of The Observer, and I also took a cameraman with me who actually created the name and he was an ex-football hooligan who'd been very dysfunctional in his life and became very functional and done recovery and the rest. So I said, oh, come with me. And he took some pictures and everything. And we had a first gathering. There's about 400 elders there. And they agreed. It was unanimous. They said we want to have a normal livelihood, but you know, they sort of explained some of the problems they had and whatever else. And after about 4 or 5 hours of them all deliberating, about 11 elders gave speeches, and then Shimari gave a speech, and he addressed me and he said, it's unanimous that we all want to do it. We all want to do, create a normal industry and everything. But the reason we accept you is that you haven't come here with a badge, a gun, or a uniform. Like, thank you so much. Like, you know. And everyone shook my hand, and people who've been to Afghanistan know if there's serious respect, they shake your hand and they put their other hand on your heart. And I shook hands with every single person there, and then we planted a tree symbolically, and that coverage ended up on the national TV that night. And the knock-on effect was that the knock-on effect of that was Shimari contacted me about a month later and said some more elders want to meet you. And I met 100 elders in the Spingar Hotel in Jalalabad, and one of them was a member of the Taliban in the eastern area, Tagawi came from. Not far from Sarubi in eastern Afghanistan, and he stood up and gave a speech, and he said, as a child I remember picking wild pomegranates on the hills of Afghanistan. He said you know what I represent, but I welcome this man to my area and I guarantee his safety and blah 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 and all the rest of it. And he said this project could bring back some heritage to Afghanistan, you know. And I came back to England, and I came back to the UK, and I spoke to my wife and sort of friends and close family and said, oh, the next thing I do, I'm not really going to be able to stop after this. I said, the next thing I do in Afghanistan is going to be quite something. So, you know, I just want to know that you support me. And they said, well, you were never going to get a normal job anyway, so carry on, like, you know. And I flew back to Afghanistan, and I picked up the Minister of Counter Narcotics, who was General Qadaidad at the time. And we drove to see the Governor of Nangarhar, who was a chap called Gul Aga Sherzai, who's a bit of a character. And we held the third tribal gathering, had 6,500 people there, and they gave me, afterwards it was also unanimous, and they gave me 3 lorry loads of narcotics, and we burnt it on the side of a hill. And that night it ended up on 3 national TV channels in Afghanistan, and the US Embassy contacted me. So, you know, their intelligence does work, so I don't know how they got my number, you know. But they contacted me and said, can we see you? So I went to the US Embassy the next day, I met the head of USAID there, and you know, he said, what we saw on the telly was quite something. Like, and I said, well, maybe you could give me some money then, you know. And it was he said, yeah. He said, what organisation are you from? Like, and I said, oh, I haven't got one. I said, it's just me, like, you know. He said, really? I said, yeah. I said, I'm just trying to sort this problem out, you know. And he said, oh, well, we'll help you. We'll help you create a scenario. We can give you some funding. So to cut a long story short, I'd spent some time in India years before, and I looked after 75 kids in an orphanage there, and I had this charity that I'd set up, and then I got unwell and all the rest of it, and that, you know, so that had all gone dormant. So I you know, I took that charity, was still registered charity, so I put some trustees in that, and ended up you know, starting to do the paperwork with USAID to get some funds and everything, and that was that 6,500 person tribal gathering was November the 27th, 2008, and planting season's in February. So, you know, we didn't have a lot of time, and the USA took so long with their paperwork. I don't knock them, but they took so long with their paperwork that they missed the planting season. So I self-funded 40,000 trees. I self-funded growing 40,000 trees myself, and I sent out a form, an A4 sign-up form, and on it the farmer had to put a passport-sized photo, how many children they had, you know, how many people were dependent of them, you know, the amount of land they had, and that if we gave them inputs where, you know, whether it's shovels, wheelbarrows, tools, saplings, whatever, that they wouldn't grow opium. And I sent out 25,000 forms in 4 districts of Nangarhar province, and I had just over 22,000 come back to my house, all stamped, signed up. It was quite something, you know. It's not easy to you know, to organise that in a place like Afghanistan. But anyway, that happened, and then I went to a conference. There was a conference in Paris where President Karzai was going around on a fundraising trip, and I thought I'd go to the conference to hear what they had to say. And the phone rings when I'm in Paris, and it was a chap called Lord Reading from England, and he said, I'd like to get involved with your project. And I said, oh, I'll come and meet you then. And he lived in Cirencester, which is just up the road from Swindon. And I flew into Bristol Airport, and he picked me up. And he was he's a pretty eccentric character. He didn't bother about red lights and things like that, and just, you know, just carried on. And we got to Cirencester. It's quite funny. He said, oh, he said, have you ever been here before? Like that. And he speaks quite posh. Have you ever been here before? I said, actually, I used to come here shoplifting, like, you know. And his response was, oh, bloody marvellous. He said, never had the opportunity myself. Anyway, he said he'd help, and so we had a dinner. A charity dinner at Kensington Palace in end of March 2009. 144 guests, and General Sir Richard Dannatt, the head of the British Army, came to it, and for me it was quite overwhelming. You know, from where I'd been in my life to that event. You know, my family came to it, and there was a few different media people and all the rest of it. And I brought 20 Afghans to that event. The visas was quite difficult to get, but we managed it. And I also brought someone from USAID, and I sort of presented everything. And General Sir Richard Dannatt gave I didn't ask him, he asked me if it was all right, which I was quite humbled by. Could he give a speech? Because he was so overwhelmed by what he saw and all the rest of it. And he gave a speech. And he said that he'd been with the head of the Afghan army like 2 weeks earlier or something, and it was quite ironic that he'd been offered pomegranate juice, not tea, you know. And anyway, I flew back to Afghanistan after that event, and I called some pretty key elders from around the country, and they came and stayed at my house in Kabul. I've had the same house for 7 years there now, and we talked about it, and they said, oh, it should be a national programme. If it's not a national programme, it could bring tribal conflict, so we need to make it national. Pomegranates don't grow in all provinces in Afghanistan, so it then got diversified into a horticultural strategy. I went to see USAID. They gave me $481,000, and I held another 4 tribal gatherings across Afghanistan, of which the largest was about 14,000 people in Farah. There's about 2,500 Taliban present, and all the 4 gatherings that we held, that was end of 2010, November 2010. 2 days later, about 12,000 in Herat. I had 7,000 in Mazar, and that picture there is me with the governor of Mazar province, who's he's the right-hand man of Abdullah Abdullah, who was in the elections recently, you know, trying to become president. And then the last tribal gathering was in Kandahar, which is a picture in the middle next to, and that's President Karzai's half-brother, who was quite renowned for selling opium, Ahmad Wali Karzai. And I met him 2 or 3 times and stayed at his house, and you know, he was so forthcoming with the international community in some ways, but he was very forthcoming, you know, very open with myself, and you know, because I came there tribally, you know, and he you know, he told me about the 9 suicide attempts on his life, and he told me his predicament, and that he, you know, he felt that, you know, there could be a lot more done with him as an individual, and that he felt that, you know, his position was very difficult because of his reputation for the international community to utilise him better, you know. And he asked if he said it'd be really good if you could speak to the British Embassy or to the US Embassy, because I know that in the end I'm going to be killed. And 4 months later he was killed by the head of his security. And anyway, I carried on with the project. We ended up getting unanimous support around the country from all the gatherings. The US gave me another $2 million. We planted 1.9 million pomegranate cuttings in a nursery in Afghanistan, and the root stock was not so good, and there was only 10 days of planting left to plant this 1.9 million cuttings. So I, you know, got a load of people on it, and we planted all of them in less than 10 days. But only 400 and something thousand survived and turned into saplings. So then they got planted, you know, in the farmers field. And then a chap from Singapore, quite a wealthy chap from Singapore, who'd seen me on a BBC World News interview, contacted us and said, "Oh, you need some more structure in your situation, because it's great you know you're doing what you're doing, but you need help." And he gave us a donation, and we set up. We changed the name. I was at a dinner in London, and there was a lady sat on the sofa in this dinner at this an after event of this speech and that, and it was a dinner, and there was about 20 people there, and this lady asked me what I did, and I told her what I'd been up to, and at the end of the story I said to her, we held a dinner at Kensington Palace, and she goes, "Oh, that's funny." She said, "That's where I live." Oh. So I said, "All right." She said and her name was Lady Richards, and her husband was is General Sir David Richards, who was the head of the army at the time, and then he became Chief of Defence. She said, "You need to meet my husband." So 3 days later, I'm having breakfast with you know, General Sir David Richards in Kensington Palace, thinking this is all a bit surreal and everything. But he absolutely loved what I had to say, and said that he'd you know, support, you know. So then I'm in Afghanistan, and I think McChrystal went out, and General Petraeus came in as Com ISAF, the head of all the troops, and David Richards and General Petraeus, at the day that he came in, were also having breakfast together. And David Richards called me and said, "I think you need to meet General Petraeus." So a week later, I'm in HQ ISAF meeting with General Petraeus, and James Bucknell, I think it was, who was DCOM at the time, a British officer. He was there, and there was a few other generals, and they really liked also what I had to say. So then we then created, with this donation from this chap from Singapore, we created the Plant for Peace implementation team. And this is the structure that we put together. It looks complicated. It's not so complicated. And I don't need to explain every box. But basically, there's 3 entities in Plant for Peace. There's a foundation that's task is to create cooperatives with farmers on the ground in Afghanistan, because no commercial company in the world could genuinely go with its goal of profit to a place like Afghanistan and create an organisational structure where they can then trade to the acceptance of the food industry around the world. So Plant for Peace Foundation is there to receive donations and funding, whether it be government donations or private, to put these cooperatives together. Plant for Peace, the commercial company that I'm CEO of, and develops food products to utilise the produce grown by these cooperatives. And since 1999, when I drank fruit juice for the first time, all the way through all those years, I've been developing food products with pomegranate as the main ingredient. Even in the psychiatric unit, when I was in my room, they used to think I was nuts because I would carry on producing it and messing about in the room and everything. And I'd say, no, I've got to, but I didn't even know why at the time, just kept going with it, you know. And then, so commercially, Plant for Peace creates products, value-added products, because pomegranates, as I said, don't grow in all the provinces, and we've created a horticultural strategy. So whether it's almonds, mulberry, you know, walnuts, you know, apricots, whatever it is that we can grow there, we're going to create products from it and launch them in the international supermarkets. And then overseeing that connecting us with, you know, governments and whatever else, and you know, the whole sort of higher level of you know, international dignitaries like ambassadors is the Plant for Peace steering group. So you know, obviously people like Roddy, who's the chairman of the Plant for Peace Foundation, alongside the steering group, and some of the other trustees in the Plant for Peace Foundation, they you know, they're influencers as well. And you know, one of the just touching on it, one of the trustees of the Plant for Peace Foundation is Major General Arthur Denaro, who was the chap who was the commandant of Sandhurst Military College. He became a trustee, and I told him my life story, and he invited me to his house and for dinner after becoming a trustee, and after telling my story to his wife over dinner, I went to use his downstairs bathroom, and he had there's pictures of him on, you know, pictures of him in his downstairs bathroom with Prince Charles, and you know, they were sort of chatting away about Prince Charles, and he asked if I'd like to meet him. So I ended up going up to Balmoral and explaining this project to Prince Charles, and I was completely bowled over by how he was, how humble he was, how receptive he was, how he really believed in what I had to say, really believed in it. I ended up telling my life story at Clarence House in the end, and I ended up also having meetings at Highgrove and everything. And I am overwhelmed by how he is, his passion is agriculture, and he really does believe in it. So that's all gone on. We're now at the point where the model of Plant for Peace is that the foundation does cooperatives. Commercially, we create products. We create sustainability that by creating products and put them into the marketplace. And every single product we sell, we will grow a tree in Afghanistan. So the first product range that we've created is fruit bars, and over the last 2 years, we developed a way to take pomegranates on the trees of Afghanistan that are not good enough presentable to go into the market as whole fruit, and also not good enough to be juiced. And in Afghanistan, they break these pomegranates open and they sun-dry them on the roofs of their houses. It's called anardana pomegranate, dried pomegranate seed. But there's no commercial value for it. So I took this sun-dried pomegranate and created a process where we turn it into a powder form, because in solid food products, 6.6% moisture content creates mould. So if you buy a food product anywhere in, you know, in Britain, for example, in the supermarket, and it's, you know, it's a fruit bar or anything solid, you'll never see more than 2 or 3% pomegranate in, because the food industry is only using concentrate because it's not developed enough yet. So we developed this powder form, so our fruit bar range has a minimum of 20% pomegranate in it, roughly 25%, because the aim of Plant for Peace is not, although we need to create profit, to create sustainability, so that we step away from governments having to fund, like the British government or USAID and people like that. Profit is not the key goal of Plant for Peace. Utilising the produce of the farmers is the key goal, because that's what will create markets and maintain sustainability and feed them, feed their families. So so that's the model. So that's the 4 flavours of fruit bars we've created. I told my life story, I'm jumping a little bit, I told my life story to 150 executives at Unilever about 2 and a bit years ago, and I explained that you know, besides Plant for Peace developing products on its own, we also need to develop products with major food companies, because their distribution platform's huge. So I'm at Unilever saying this, and I told them exactly the whole story that I've told you today, and it was funny, I finished the story, and the head of ice cream jumped up and said, "Oh, we want to make an ice cream with you." So 2 weeks later, I'm sat with Jerry Greenfield, who made Ben and Jerry's in America, and we've done an awful lot of product development with them. We haven't concluded the flavour. We've we've protected the brand name of a joint flavoured ice cream, but we haven't finished the final development or anything yet. And the fruit bars are due. These four flavours of fruit bar are due to launch in Waitrose and Holland and Barrett in the first half of 2015. The programme we exported a load of machinery to Afghanistan, and we trained about 30 Afghans to turn this seed into powder. And this is a real and also a very surreal moment for me in my whole Afghan experience. When it was President Karzai's, the election came round in, I think, 2010. I was on an aeroplane for the day of the election, flying from Kabul to Kandahar. There was about 300 people on it. I was the only Westerner on it. everybody else on it was all had the black turbans, and you know, it's like, you know, going to Kandahar, and you obviously you represent Taliban and everything, but you know, whether they were all Taliban or not, it's a different matter. But you know, they're quite a bunch. And I was on the aeroplane, and I was probably the only person not laughing. I shouldn't probably say this because he's hilarious, but the whole lot of them were in stitches as they watched Mr. Bean on the big screen. And I thought, this is absolutely surreal. You know, this is really bizarre. And then a few days later, I was back in Carbon, and I went just across the road from my house. There's a little row of shops, and there's a chap there who's got a hair, you know, cuts hair and shaves and everything. So I went there for my shave, and he was watching Mr. Bean. And he said, oh, Bean. I said, oh, you like him? You like this? He said, yeah, I like. I said, yeah, everyone like this. After I went back home, and I said to my friend, I said, hey, I was on the aeroplane, that happened. I said, and now this happened. He said, Babuji, he said, Afghanistan calls him Babuji. He said, he's famous in all the community, everyone. And the friend I was talking to, this was really unbelievable, the friend I was talking to said had built schools in Nuristan. He's from Nuristan, and he's a key member of the Plant for Peace team in Kabul. And he built a school in Nuristan, and he said, even in school, they're watching Mr. Bean. You know, he said, even there, in a place like that, watching me. I said, he should get involved in Plant for Peace. He just doesn't know how powerful he is. He just doesn't, he wouldn't get it, like, you know. Anyway, I was speaking to Arthur Denaro, this was a few months ago, and telling him, and he said, oh, I know Rowan Atkinson, he said. So anyway, he said, the next thing I know, I have a meeting with Rowan Atkinson, and which is, you know, it's bizarre. I said, oh, Rowan, I said, you, look, please. He said, no problem. He said, you know, if you want me to help, I'll help, like, you know. So then September just gone, I held a ceremony in Kabul, and Rowan Atkinson kindly sent me his a picture and a quote which is under his name there, and we made plastic sort of business card sized cards, and I put a hole drill. We put a little hole through them, and we put green ribbon through them. Green is the colour of Islam, and we had a ceremony in the front garden of the house in Kabul, and we gave everyone Plant for Peace Foundation certificates of achievement to all the Afghans that had learnt this process, and we presented them with this, and I gave a speech and everything, and it was, they were so absolutely bowled over that chap there had been kind enough to do something that didn't really take up 5 minutes of his time, but it represented so much, really represented so much. You know, and I've emailed him today asking for 2 or 3 more things that hopefully he'll be prepared to help with. I'm sure he will be. On my journeys, I ended up being asked to go and see this lady on the left here, Her Royal Highness Princess Basma bint Ali of Jordan, and she's won quite a few awards, environmental awards and everything. And I flew to Jordan to see her, and she'd arranged. I had an hour appointment with her, and I flew to Jordan for an hour appointment, and told her my story, and she turned around to the lady who was in the appointment and said, I'll cancel everything for the day. I'm spending the rest of the day with this chap. And she said, come on. She said, I've been building the Royal Botanical Gardens in Jordan. She said, let me take you out for the day. And she took me all around the gardens, and we had a great time. And I asked her to join the steering group of Plant for Peace, you know, and she accepted straight away, which was great. So these three people here, they've, you know, even with Rowan just helping recently, they've done so much already for Plant for Peace and continue to do so. And, you know, we're literally at the point now we're going to launch this first range of products. I had a conference call with the head of procurement and their team at Unilever. They procure about £25 billion worth of ingredients a year or something. I mean, the GDP of Afghanistan's only about $6 billion or something. You know, and you know, we're looking at the moment we're looking at they own 200 brands, and we're looking at all their brands and what ingredients they might be able to take from Afghanistan. And you know, Plant for Peace would obviously oversee all the you know, analysis of the ingredients in Afghanistan and make sure that they're up to standard, that they're clean, packed, labelled, processed and delivered, you know, across the world. And we're literally at the point now, Dr. Ashraf Ghani has become president, which for Plant for Peace was quite a good thing. I met President Karzai, but he knew that his, I word it in the best way I can, his time was up. So, you know, Ashraf Ghani became president. I had lunch with Dr. Ghani, Dr. President Ashraf Ghani, about 2 years ago in his house, you know, before he was ever thinking of it. And he told me then that Plant for Peace was a very viable dream for Afghanistan, you know. and dreams, if you believe, can become reality. And yeah, that's my story. Thanks.